others. I am jumping on from my studio, which is why the background is a little bit different. But I woke up this morning with inspiration to pull back a lesson that I actually shared last year. So I'll give you all just a few moments to see about some folks jumping on. The energy is certainly intense these days, and it begins to make us question about where we want to spend our energies, on others, on ourselves, on society. Where do we make these choices? And what's important is for us to understand that it's important for us to make the choices on our own, to focus on our story. So let me know if you can hear me. If one of you can give me a heads up, a thumbs up saying, yes, you can hear me, we're all good. Because this lesson will be one that you will enjoy today. So I can still see the chat comments. If somebody can just give me a thumbs up, that would be great. And I will launch into what we're going to talk about here today. So, all right, thank you. Success, yay. All right, so where do we invest our energies, dear ones? That's the question. So I have an analogy for you. For those of you that have been with me for over a year, you saw this analogy last year, but it was pretty impactful. So I was encouraged today to jump back on and share this. So I am going to pull some old books from what I've kept from my daughter. My daughter is 24 now, so that tells you how old these things are. But we had this wonderful picture book, okay? Wonderful picture book, and as you flip through it, you have all of these scenes. And she used to absolutely love all of this. What I want to use the book for today, okay, we're going to use the book for today, is that this represents what is happening collectively in society. And so what in society, the stories are large and loud and big. And as we think through this, okay, we see lots of, villains and lots of stories of what's flying around, and it feels very colorful and sometimes overwhelming. I want you to remember and think about this when I share this analogy, that this represents everything that's happening in society, the collective story that's unfolding. It doesn't matter what country you're in. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. This book represents the bigger story that's unfolding. All right. Then I had a whole series of little bitty books. This was from a lovely little Peter Rabbit collection. They were miniature books, and my daughter loved these little miniature books. But I want to talk about you. So I made this little book for you. And what this is this is a little bitty book. And it has little bitty pages, okay? And my daughter used to love to hold these. Now, what's happening is that you, dear ones, you are living your personal story inside this larger collective society. So this is your personal story, okay? So each one of us as individuals are living our own storybook that's taking place inside of this larger collective story. Now, there are 7 billion souls in the world. So we're all living our own storybook, dear ones. So if I were to pick a storybook, here's Ida's, and here's Sonia's, here's Debbie's, here's Joy, here's Diane. You see where I'm going? Is that we all, okay? Oh, big hug from my sister from Tunisia, North Africa. Love my sisters in Africa and North Africa. Thank you so much for saying hello, Nad. But what happens, dear ones, is that there are lots of stories, okay? My hands aren't big enough, but there are lots of stories that are unfolding here in this big story. 7 billion little storybooks are playing out in the big collective story. 7 billion. So 7 billion. I want you to think about this. We're each living our little story the way we need to live it. But what happens sometimes is that we forget. We forget that what the journey is about at the moment, what the journey really is about, dear ones, is for you to live your story well. your story well. And what happens is that sometimes we get caught up in the bigger collective story. Now, please understand, there are lots of chapters in this collective story. I mean, I could go page after page. It doesn't matter whether we're looking at religions or we're looking at countries or whether we're looking at the mainstream media or alternate media. Everybody, there's all these huge, huge things that are playing out in the world, dear ones. And it's very easy. It's very easy for us to forget that we're doing our storybook and we feel like we get lost. We get lost in this bigger story. What I was being nudged by my divine team today was to remind you that this story, folks, let it do what it does, okay? This is the collective story. It is playing out. What they reminded me was to pull your story out and make your story the focus, dear ones. That's what each of us are being asked to do right now. Do we need to be aware that this whole collective story is happening? Sure. Don't be surprised when all kinds of things are popping out and you're like, good heavens, are you kidding me? Really? Holy cow. I mean, it's loud. It's big. It's overwhelming at times. That's going on, yes. But what they want us to do and encourage us to do is to focus in on our story. Because our story, our personal story, is every bit as important as that collective story. Now, the reality is that both are happening at the same time. The collective story is happening. Your story is happening. Okay, I talk about this in the book, Your Lion Inside. Both stories are happening at the same time. So I almost want you to think about this as an infinity loop. It's all happening. It's enough to know about this, but they don't want you to get drowned in this. What's being asked is for us to focus on our individual story, not the other 7 billion stories. Because as we all know, everyone has an opinion right now of how your story should be lived. What we're being encouraged and invited to do is stop spending efforts on everybody else's story. Let them live their stories. Let the world do what it does. Instead, today, dear ones, focus on your story. Because your story is being written one moment, one decision at a time. This is the story that we're here to live. Yes, many of us have become aware of just how big and how crazy the collective story is, but we don't need to drown ourselves in that. What we're asking, this is resonating with some of you. I'm glad to see that. Absolutely. I'm glad to see this because it's really easy to get lost in either the big story or to want to tell everybody else how they should live their story. Sometimes they're in the same household and we might have 3 other stories going on while we're trying to live our story. And we can become very, very sucked in into how to live their stories. But dear ones, what we're being asked is living your story. So what does that mean? What does that mean? I'd like to hear from my sweet sisters on the channel. Living your story means slowing down enough to shift your focus from all those other things. Shift your focus from all those other things. And living your story means that you begin to say, what do I need to let go of that no longer serves me? What do I want to empty out of my life so that I can make space for? What is it? What is it that's important for this journey for me at this moment? Because that's the only story, dear ones, that we can live well. Now, it could be that your story is to have more courage. And you are encouraged in your story to somehow show up in the collective story. Maybe it's speaking out against something. Maybe it's being more truthful with the voice that you share. And that's fine. That might be what your story is. But may we honor May we honor everyone else's story. We can honor their stories and let them write it. Some of them are awakened, okay? Some people are awakened and they are absolutely being asked to have more courage and step more into that collective story, and may we celebrate what they're doing. There are some people that had no idea. They're completely unawakened. They have no idea that things are awry. They're still stuck in the 3D illusion, and we're looking at them going, hello, can you not figure out and see what's going on? May we honor their journey and let them live their story. Then there may be a few other people that we start to bump into and say, oh, your story is similar to mine. May we be friends? May we love that, Robin, to let go? Absolutely. It might be that you find a few others that are on similar tracks to you, and that's great. We can enjoy that. We can invite that. In fact, we can make space for having others that are on our journey. That's part of why many of you are on the journey. Our stories have intersected, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be here to honor you and to be with you on this journey. But I too am learning, dear ones. I too am learning. So the reality is that what percentage of your time are you investing in you, in your story? You know, when you look at it and you say, okay, am I spending 50% of my time consumed in this bigger story? Folks, the world is going to do what it needs to do. And it is going to be big and large and changing and crazy and sometimes overwhelming. Let the world do what it does. Lessen the focus of what you spend here. Are you investing too much energy there? Are you investing too much energy worried about everyone else's story and saying, oh, they should do so-and-so, oh, my spouse, my daughter, my son, my cousin, my friend, my aunt, my uncle, my neighbor? You see, what happens on this life journey is that we really don't understand what everybody else's journey is. That's something that's agreed before we ever arrive, dear ones. And that is something that those of us in the West can learn from the East. They have a tremendous amount of wisdom to offer in that respect. We don't know what their stories are. Maybe their story was to be unawakened for this lifetime. Maybe their story was to be awakened and be courageous and be out there speaking up. Maybe their speaking up makes us uncomfortable. Is it perhaps that we could invest that energy in living our story well? You living your story well, dear ones? You know, I recognize that these times are really, really challenging. And I hear from so many people, professionally, personally, of where our energies are being sucked in. I know it is really easy to get lost in these other stories. I remember at times that I didn't even understand what my story was because it was still tucked away in my heart and I had not yet, it was covered up. I didn't even know what my story was. I didn't even know. In fact, I lived 20 years of my life without any understanding. Miss Robin, I'm sending you a great deal of protection around you, for protection as the gust of winds come through, dear one. So I'm so glad, and I will send you much love as you are prepping. Okay, Miss Robin, I'm sending you much love. But some of you, please know that you might not have even birthed your storybook yet. Your story could be like I just got chills on this one. I obviously was guided to go here. Your story could be tucked away in your heart, and you haven't ever, as Miss Bonnie said, that you've been carrying everyone else's book, okay? Taking care of all the kids and the husband and the people and the church and the community, that you've never even uncovered that story that's inside. Sometimes it starts out as a whisper. My story started out as a whisper. It was what I perceived as the most difficult and tragic and challenging thing in my life. And what that difficult time in my life 10 years ago did for me is it had me at least begin to discover my book, discover my story for Kimberly Faith. And each day and each moment And each moment, I wrote a new page. And then I was brave enough to write the next page and the next page. And then there were times I got scared and I closed it and I hid it again because it was such a personal part of who I was that I wasn't sure how to be brave enough to get through it. And then I would bring it back out and I'd look at her. Or what is your story? So, girl, please know, dear ones, that I share with you the things that I have personally lived through myself. I will never ask of you what I have not asked for myself. And then so what I did is I started to become brave enough to write my story a little bit more. And I wrote a few more pages, and that went well for a while. And then I didn't hide it, but I closed it for a little while because the story was almost getting too big. I couldn't comprehend it. And then I opened it back up and it became more frequent and became a greater part of who I was. And then there was for me, now this is my story, dear ones. Then one day I realized that there was a bigger story. And that's when I sat down and I wrote Your Lion Inside, the book that I wrote. Because what I discovered was deeply embedded in, I love that, Gloria, your story about trusting and believing in yourself. Gloria, that's a big one. That's a big one. Let go and trust yourself. So many messages we have received in life to tell us not to trust ourselves. Dear ones, you can trust yourself. And that's what I want to encourage you, is that because living your story well, for me, it led to a book. Great. For you, it might be leading to having a new hobby. For you, it might be spending some time by yourself. You know, there was a time in my life that I would have never gone and taken vacation by myself, but that's what I'm doing. I leave Thursday for Sedona, and I am taking a vacation to go to a spiritual retreat and to spend time hiking and to invest in myself so I can go back and reconnect with my own story. This is precious. Don't underestimate the fact that this is small compared to the bigger story, because for you, it is everything. For you, it is everything, dear ones. This lifetime is like a lottery lifetime. It is an opportunity for us to integrate so many things that we've learned from the past, of what we need to overcome, of what we want to let go of, and what we want to allow space for. It might be that we end up writing a whole series of little books for ourselves, because maybe we spend some time and figure out what was our little book like in our 20s, our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And even those of you that are in an older season of your life, don't underestimate that you too could be writing an entirely new chapter. Part of what we're each being asked right now is to let go of all preconceived notions of what we thought life was going to be like at this stage. We've done a disservice in thinking about things like retirement and what life is like later. It doesn't mean things have to be over. It means that we're entering a new chapter. What chapter are you going to write for this next level of life? Maybe you've just had a child and you're beginning to figure out that's a brand new chapter that you're writing. And maybe eventually you will have a variety of different books for all these beautiful different chapters. Maybe you've wanted to paint or learn some other new skill and you've been holding out. The reality is that what we're each being asked to do in this crazy world situation is to do your story well. That's the sole message from today, sweet sisters. Do your story well. Let the rest go. Let the rest go. Pull it out. Pull your story. Look at it. Decide what pages you want to keep, what pages you want to let go, what new blank pages you want to add. This is such a precious, precious gift. Treat it as such. Treat it as such. And don't forget that your story, if we can focus our energies and our efforts in your story alone, each one of us, then that, my sweet sisters and my dear brothers, that will be worth the journey. That will be worth the journey. So that is the message today, sweet sisters. Sending you lots of love. lots of hope, lots of light, and know that you and I will be together on this journey as we continue. You're very, very special, and I want nothing more for you. Amen, Miss Joy, a brand new story. I want nothing more than for each of you to discover that beautiful, beautiful story that's your own, that's still waiting to emerge. Until next time, dear ones, until next time.